Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. And today I'm just gonna talk to you all about some of the feedback that I got from my book, from a beta reader that I got off of that I hired off of Fiverr. So if without further ado, let's get into the video. So for the video purposes, I'm not gonna say where who's the Fiverr seller that I'm from their own privacy and stuff. I don't want to say who's the person that I went with, but they were good. They gave me harsh feedback though, but I know that it will probably make my story better, or maybe they weren't my ideal reader. So I have to keep that in mind. But I will try to read off of what the feedback that the person gave me. So the person stated the strengths of the story. Premise. I think the great strength of the story is the premise. We meet a protagonist at a low point in her life, losing the possibility of a future she was looking forward to. In terms of the events, the first scene does its job in setting up who Essie is, where she is at in her life, and what it means for her to be going through this breakup. This is a great starting point. It sets the reader up to root for her, for the main character to find her happiness again and to move on from a heartbreaking situation. So yeah, I was reading that. Sorry if I was looking down. I was reading this paper. But yeah, so it talked a lot about like my strengths, which is like the opening scene of the book, which starts off with her having a breakup um and with her longtime partner of 3 years, Seth. So yeah, I think I did do a good job in that. But let's read the weaknesses that she has for me about that, about my story. So in the for writing, I understand this is a first draft and the quality of the writing at a sentence level is not in its final form, but the prose made the story hard to get into. I'll get into this in detail in this writing section of the report, but it feels like a majority of the word count is spent on details that don't really serve the story or help move the plot forward. So that kind of hurt to hear, but I was glad that she pointed it out. Even though I don't really agree with everything that she said, I know that she wasn't saying it out of malice. She was just actually trying to help me out with my story. And I always want honest feedback about my story. So I never want people to feel like they have to give me glowing reviews about my book, because I know that I'm just a newbie author and I'm just trying to actually do what I set out to do. So the next thing that she pointed out was pacing slash lack of conflict. This connects to the writing in a way, since so much of the novella is spent on unimportant details. The actual the actual meat of the story gets lost in the series of events that make up Essie's life, and it makes the pacing of the manuscript feel really slow. We don't meet Amadi until a third of the way into the manuscript, and once he enters the narrative, there is no more conflict in the story. Well, while I feel like her assumptions and her critique of it was fair, I do understand that the story is not really about her falling in love as much as it is about her finding herself again after heartbreak. So she does end up falling in love in the story, but there's two. How many love interests in the story? There's two love interests in the story, and you'll find out if you read the story when it comes out who she end up being with. But Amadi is one of them, and then there's one named Kobe. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. So, um, what she says also is themes. It felt like the novella was as a whole was struggling with what it wanted to say. I'm not a reader that focuses on the theme first and foremost, but I think that the romance books should make have a sense of what they're trying to say about love. The narrative felt like it went back and forth on the idea of needing a partner, building a meaningful life without one, and the importance of marriage. The value of a person being inherent regardless of their marital status. So like yeah, I agree with that. But I guess like the whole story was about Essie finding herself after heartbreak and stuff. So I feel like her critique was warranted, but at the same time, if you think about African culture, there's a lot of emphasis on finding their partner after you get to a certain age. And also like yeah, also like the importance of marriage is there, especially if you're religious and stuff. So I feel like she's at the age where that would be somewhat of a focus in her life. So I feel like, yeah, while that critique makes sense, I also know that if the person doesn't understand the African culture, they will not understand why there was an emphasis on marriage in this book. But it was about marriage and other people's experiences of heartbreak and stuff, and realizing that like you're alone in all of your issues, but then realizing that you're not really alone because are other people out there that are experiencing the same thing as you. But yeah, so I'm just gonna fast forward to one extra thing that I think was was important that I highlighted it. It's hard to tell who's speaking when a dialogue is formatted like this. But also this conversation doesn't tell me much about them. She asks what artists he has heard of before, and he answers the question differently each time. Then she references two intellectual minds joined together when they both just admitted they didn't know much about the subject. There's nothing wrong with not knowing about much about art, but if the point is to show how they both enjoy an intellectual conversation, then it should probably be about a subject they're both passionate and knowledgeable about. So like, yeah, I agree with what she had to say. So I'm not even too mad about any of this because I know that like I can improve my story because it was just the first draft. So I'm not really like I don't want to hear too many about stellar reviews about my book. I just wanted to hear like what you liked, what you didn't like, what you thought I could improve on in the story. So I can say that what she said in the end was overall it felt like to me like it felt sorry. Overall it felt to me like the story might benefit from a clearer sense of its main priorities and the message it wants to leave the reader with. There are moments where Essie actively tries to build a fulfilling life that isn't solely focused on finding a partner, and those moments are interesting. At the same time, other parts of the story seem to play against the idea, which made the overall takeaway feel a bit mixed for me. While Essie does have does make meaningful progress in her healing, her happiness ultimately seems tied to meeting Amadi. Even during moments where she appears to be growing more comfortable with herself, the people around her often reinforce the idea that she should still be holding out hope for a partner. As a result, it felt like Essie was on the verge of fully embracing the idea of being single, but the story didn't quite allow her to reach the place on her own. So it talks like my story also talks about racism, the history of slavery, plus size discrimination, etc. and stuff. And she felt like that it was important that I did include them, but that I should have dig deeper, I think, into it. But overall I think that her critiques was very good, and it was very harsh for me to hear, but I also know that I needed to hear it at that moment, and I need to do stuff to improve my story. So that was very insightful to know. Um I asked her two questions. How did this story make you feel? And she said, I think the premise of the story feels romantic and hopeful, which is really appealing for me, though the emotional impact didn't fully land, and found myself wanting a bit more depth in the writing to feel more connected to the characters and their journey. And then does it have a good happy ending? And she said that the ending aligns well with what you would expect from the genre, and Essie does find her happy ending with a partner who feels right for her. For me, though, I think I would have felt more satisfied if there had been a bit more conflict and development along the way to make the resolution more fully earned. So I guess that's all I have to say for about my story. I know that it wasn't out of malice, so I'm not really upset about it, but I was upset in the beginning because I was just like, dang, I don't think people like my writing. But then again, people interpret your writing through their own lens and through their if they're an avid reader, they're also trying to compare your stories to other people's stories. So like while that was kind of hard to hear, I know that I needed to hear it so that I can improve my story and not get a big head and think that everybody is going to like my story, cuz quite frankly people may not, and people may like my story and relate to it. But yeah. So if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. Also comment down below what you thought what stood out to you about this video. And if you're going to watch this video all through this point, you might as well subscribe and turn on post notifications so you can be notified every time your girl upload a video. And with that being said, bye.